Hi, everyone, and welcome to the JMCO channel. Today we are here with Kevin Golden. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing great, Faith. How about you?
Good, good. Happy Monday.
You as
Um,
well.
so today we're talking about margin pressure is the new normal, how manufacturers are trying to stay profitable. So the first question is, why does it feel like margin pressure is constant for manufacturers right now?
No one wants to ever say, "Well, I made less money this year than I did years prior." Right? If I make an investment, things like that, that's understandable. But just simply the fact that we're less profitable is not usually a great answer that most people want to hear. So I think just from a pure like aesthetics, everybody wants to continue to remain on those margins. Why? To keep up profits, right? Continue doing better. We want to show that. Why? We usually correlate that with growth, right? Now, also, there's a lot of other costs that continue to accelerate. Look at labor. Manufacturers have a lot of labor, right? That is going to continues to tick upwards, right? And so there's even bigger pressure where maybe you could cover up with, you had good margins, cover up costs here or there. As those costs continue to rise, as the industries continue to tighten down on pricing and things like that, those margins become more pertinent to hit, right? Otherwise, you're not making money, you're losing money, right? So I think there's these other costs, namely maybe overhead and labor, things like that, that sneak in there that now you can't really cover up. These kind of increases can only be maintained by hitting those numbers you need to hit, hitting those margin numbers.
Right. So where are companies underestimating the true impact of rising costs?
Well, one, I think some of the answers just flat out don't know what those costs are, right? I mean, most of them can tell you, okay, maybe what my materials are, how those are doing right now. But what about all the other costs that are associated with manufacturing? There's a lot more than just raw materials in your product, right? So I think where people underestimate it is some of these other costs kind of creep up on them. Yes, we know labor is a big one and so forth, right? And all, but if you some manufacturers, I had one the other day that was scrap. Their scrap had just gotten out of hand. And it wasn't that it was just there one day and it wasn't previously. We all manufacturers have scrap, right? But the amount of scrap relative to how much they're producing just didn't make sense, right? So I think there's things like that, what we'll call profit leaks, if you will, where some of these costs just don't just kind of sneak in and they become larger than what you think because you probably just don't think a whole lot about them. And scrap's one perfect example of that.
Yeah. What are the biggest hidden margin killers you're seeing right now?
Probably because some of the things I just talked about, some of those profit leaks, right? I think outside of, so your overhead is one. There's a lot of people when they look at their inventory, when they look at their pricing models and things like that, they take into account a raw material, they take into account the person working on that assembly line or so forth. What they don't take into account is all the people who indirectly touch it or all the costs that indirectly touch that product, right? And so now maybe the margins even look great, right? But by the time they take out their overhead, now they're not right where they want to be, or maybe their cash flow isn't right where they want it to be. So again, some of those profit leaks can look like scrap, rework, inefficiencies. They can also look like, hey, overhead costs that have silently grown, right? That maybe you just haven't paid as much attention to, either because you're not tracking it through your inventory or it's just secretly crept up. And again, you're paying so much attention to, okay, how we make our product. Are we doing it well? Are we selling the numbers we need, the units we need to sell? Things like that you're not silently paying attention to all these other costs, these overhead costs that are just silently chipping away at it if you don't stay on top of that. So to me, a lot of it goes back to the overhead, but also the indirect costs that indirectly impact your product that you're making.
Have you ever had someone come to you and you look at things and you're like, you uncover something big that they were totally missing?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, most people, it's just not being aware of the ripple effect of everything that touches your product, right? I mean, I had one recently, a manufacturer. This is a pretty, straightforward one. They're just not taking labor into account. And some of that is because they have several people doing several different hats. So it gets mixed up between, well, I'm not just sitting there every day making this widget, right? I mean, making the widget, and then part of the day I'm selling, and part of the day I'm dealing with vendors, and then part of the day I'm working in the office and administrative. They got multiple hats because they're a small outfit. So some of those roles get jumbled up, right? And they're not taking into account oh my gosh, yeah, maybe 25% of my time, I'm actually helping make those products. I'm not covering my costs as well when I go out to price things. Or I think I'm making X margin, but it's really Y because of, again, all these other costs that you're not taking into account. So it's just being very diligent about what those costs are and kind of a revelation about what you are or are not taking into account, whether it's in your pricing module, whether it's just in expectations for the year, whether it's in your cash flow models, any of that.
Yeah, and I feel like even more so now, people are going to be wearing different hats, and doing multiple jobs and tasks and stuff. So I think that's something to actually think about. I like that. What financial metrics should manufacturers be watching weekly, not monthly?
Yeah, to me, it's anything that really impacts your cash conversion cycle. Now, what is that? That's from when we go out and we spend money to buy raw materials all the way till it turns back into cash. So it goes through the whole cycle of raw materials, then WIP, finished goods, AR, cash, now cash back in the door. Now we start the cycle all over again, right? Anything that really impacts that, you should be paying attention to regularly, right? Because it takes a lot of cash, a lot of capital and so forth to run a manufacturing company, right? From the people to the materials to all of that. So really that goes back to tracking, how long is your inventory outstanding, right? How long does it take for that inventory to sit until it's sold, right? Your payables outstanding, your AR outstanding, right? So payables and receivables, all those things that impact cash. Because again, probably some of the biggest complaints people have, or the stressors they feel at least, is on cash, right? So anything that impacts that, you should be tracking that regularly on a very, I would say sometimes even daily, depending on how stringent that is or how big we're talking about, but at least probably on a week by week basis.
Absolutely. What should leaders be thinking about pricing in a volatile cost environment?
Well, one, I think the knee-jerk reaction, whether it's coming from their financial provider or them themselves, is just, okay, we're not making the amounts we want to, let's increase our pricing, right? And that may be to an extent, but at the same time, you're going to get pushback in your market, in your industry, in your niche of manufacturing. Maybe you can't do that because of competitors, right? So you've got to really tighten up other ways, right? And some of that is really just being aware of all the different levers, if you will, that really impact your bottom line, right? So I think when you ask, hey, as a leader within the company, it's understanding how any tweaks operationally, okay, price increase, okay, cost reduction, okay, we're more efficient, we can make things quicker now, right? Use of technology, things like that. How does that impact us from a goal of where we're trying to get financially, right? Whether we're in a cash flow issue, how does that impact that? So again, I think a lot of people just think of just the pricing, right? Or just the cost. Go back to my scrap example. I mean, just noticing that, hey, scrap is a lot higher than what, well, why is that? Maybe we're throwing away a whole lot of material that we could repurpose, reuse. Maybe we could maybe the people working on that line just don't understand the really cost impact of what they're doing, right? So they may not realize they're wasting as much as they are, right? Things like that. Ask a lot of those types of questions could help you be more profitable, and you maybe didn't increase your pricing at all. But then again, pricing sometimes, you need to take that into account, especially, with the tariffs and everything, the roller coaster ride that are tariffs that are going up and down, right? Understanding, hey, when those costs come into play, what is our volatility? How much could we potentially pass on to clients before we're going to lose out, kind of in a worst case, best case scenario? So again, being aware of where those lanes are, where those guides are, and well, I could push prices up to, but you can't just pass on 100% because then you'd lose out in the market. So
yeah, and the next question kind of ties in with that, which is, where does inventory strategy play in protecting cash flow and margins?
Yeah, inventory is just cash sitting on a shelf. Okay, yes. So if you want to put it very simplistically, that's what it is, right? And so the longer it sits there, the longer, go back to that cash conversion cycle, longer before you can get that made back into cash that you can do something else with, whether it's buy inventory, make investments, whatever it may be. So I think stay away from the extremes. Way too much inventory because we're nervous, or we got a great discount on it. Okay, great. But did we actually utilize that discount to its fullest capacity? Or did we buy so much that now we have way too much? Now we have inventory that's obsolete that now we have to get rid of. We can no longer use, right? Well, you just ate into your discount there. So good intentions, bad result, right? So again, inventory management, probably, again, go back to something you should probably be looking at on a week by week, even day by day basis, right? But you've got to be really in tune with your supply chain. You've got to be really in tune with the relationships on that supply chain to know how quickly do I need to get inventory in, as well as the demand. So stuff coming in as well as stuff going out. What does that really look like to be able to monitor that properly, right? And when it doesn't go the way, oh man, we had to throw away inventory, or hey, we had to delay a sale from a delivery by 2 weeks. Why did that happen? And constantly, what I'll call kind of doing a post-mortem, if you will, on, hey, during this time period, here's what went well, here's what didn't go well, why or why not, and then making those tweaks.
Absolutely. So I feel like this is like, you're the expert. This next question is you. It's like what you know. How can better financial visibility actually become a competitive advantage?
Yeah, I think this ties back to what I said earlier about knowing what your boundaries are. Where I was getting at there is, so God forbid we have another 2008 or COVID or something like that, but the world's crazy, so who knows what's going to happen. Having better financial visibility will help you to better protect yourself against the what if. Well, what if I want to grow what if we grow out of capacity and I have no more room to make? What if our product becomes so popular and our orders are so demanding that I grow to this amount? Well, what happens then? Well, if I make twice as much as I'm making now, will I make twice as much money? Having finely tuned financials are going to help you understand what that looks like. And even better, in a market that maybe, whether it takes a downturn like a 2008 or a COVID where everything was just kind of haywire, it kind of helps you pressure test. Okay, how long can we go until we're really in trouble, right? What if our orders all of a sudden stopped, right? Or not stop, but cut a third off, right? What would that look like? What would that really mean? Do we have to lay off of a third of our people? Hopefully not. But how can we prepare against that? You can kind of pressure test yourself when you have really good financials that tie into what you're doing. When you don't, it just shot in the dark, right? You may be working off of good data and making good decisions, terrible data, making terrible decisions, but it helps you plan for the what if. Again, what if things go well? What does that look like? But what if also things go badly? What if the economy, things I can't control, go poorly? What if these tariffs come back in a much higher amount in the future? What does that mean to me? What changes do I have to make in my organization? How do I pivot? Good financials will be a part of that solution.
And I think that kind of, again, the next question, what separates struggling or manufacturers who are maintaining profitability from those that are struggling?
I think one of them is having leadership that's invested in running the company. And what I mean by that, you hear this saying, don't just work in the company, work on the company, right? There's a lot more to it than just how to make it. Sure, maybe whenever you were, a brand new startup with 5 employees, that would probably be okay. It's kind of one and the same. But as you've grown, especially if you've had maybe a family company around for 30, 40, 50 years, really there's a lot more to it than just, can I make my product really, really well? Can I manage other people to do the same? Can I rely upon my vendors to provide the quality materials I need to do the same? Are they keeping the saves up to the same standard? Personnel issues, people, right? There's a lot more that goes into it than just, do I have the knowledge to make that? That may be where it started, but not where you're at now. So I think those that have, spend the time to really work on their business and work and run their business in addition to knowing how to manufacture their product. And number 2, just being honest about what you don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm in the accounting financial. I don't know everything there is in accounting. There's just too much in there. I can't be an expert of that. So surrounding myself with my strengths, with people who have strengths where I have weaknesses and vice versa, we help one another out. So being in tune with that and not being afraid to make that investment can then help you take that next step to, again, help you meet your vision, your goals, whether that's growing at a certain percentage, make a certain rate, whatever that may mean for you, kind of helps you. I think more people who are in tune with that and can admit to that, rather than kind of trying to do it all themselves, are going to find themselves most of the time more successful than not.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned multiple things that people can do to be proactive, and I
Right.
think it's hard to say just one, but the last question of today is, what's one move manufacturers should be making right now to protect margins? Like, and I mean, you could probably do 5, 20, I don't know, but I mean, in your mind, like, what do you think is really?
My mind, be in tune with your costs. I know that sounds really simple, but one question I'll ask a manufacturer is I'll say, hey, okay, you make, this widget. What's your profit margin on that widget? And then when I look at their financials and look at what they thought they're making, they're completely different. Now I don't know which one's right. Maybe their gut is right, but that's what they're making decisions on. Then again, maybe the financials are right and they think they're making a lot more than not, and sitting there scratching their head wondering, well, why is cash not where it needs to be? Why do I feel like I'm always struggling, right? So I think one is just being in tune with your costs, right? And that means not only being aware of all the costs that impact you and how they impact what you make, but then making sure your financials reflect that, right? So when you actually look at that data, it's real data you're looking at, not some made up numbers because you have incorrect assumptions in there, right? So just being in tune with that. Why do I say that? Because as soon as you're in tune with that, you know when there's a problem. Now you can see, oh yeah, hey, profit margin slipped by 5%. Why? Now, what the answer to that is could be a lot of different things, but why? Simply asking that question, looking at that constantly will then help you unravel. Oh, well, here's maybe where we're leaking issues. Oh, I didn't realize that this cost had grown up that much now that we're producing at X volume. Okay, we need to adjust for that moving forward. Otherwise, that's going to continue to be a profit leak, right? So there's no one answer to that, but I think if I had to simplify it, just be in tune with what's normal and where you want to be and what those costs really are. So you'll know when they deviate, whether it's for the good or for the bad.
Yeah, and I think people need to remember that if you throw something into ChatGPT, it usually tells you what you want to hear.
That's true.
That's why going to an expert and having sound advisors is crucial to everyone's success.
Just like anything else, it's a great tool, and there's going to be a lot more cool, neat tools, technologically, AI, all that stuff to come. But it's a tool nonetheless, right? It's not you, the business owner.
No, absolutely not. Well, it was great talking to you today, Kevin. I can't wait to have another episode with you, and have a great week.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Faith.
Thanks.